There, I'm Greg Sanders, Vice President of Editorial for the WTWH Media Food, Retail, and Hospitality Group, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar, Cutting Edge Design and Permitting Strategies for Optimizing Restaurant Construction Programs. So in this webinar, we're going to seek to discover the pivotal role of architecture, design, permitting, and client-centric strategies in restaurant construction. In doing so, we'll explore trends, case studies, and expert strategies for understanding client needs and navigating regulatory challenges, plus learn to optimize space, maximize cost effectiveness, and leverage solutions for enhanced performance and project outcomes. So a few housekeeping notes before we get started. First, a recording of this session will be linked at qsrmagazine.com, and you can also use today's login link for on-demand viewing. Second, slides and other resources for today's program are available for download using the resources widget on the webinar console. We definitely encourage you to download those and check them out. And finally, we will be answering audience questions at the end of the program, but please do feel free to submit a question at any time. And now to begin, joining us today are several experts from Sevan Multi-Site Solutions, including Kevin Burson, Director of Architecture, Tim Kratz, VP Operations with Civil Engineering, and Jim Furris, Chief Experience Officer. And I'm going to turn it over to Jim Furris to get us started.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Jim Furris here, Chief Experience Officer for Sevan. One of the original founders, one of the owners. And for those that track where people are, I'm in St. Augustine, Florida. So anybody down that way, come by and say hello. Turn that over to Kevin Burson. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, hey everybody, Kevin Burson here, Director of Architecture with Sevan Multi-Site Solutions, based out of Phoenix. Yeah, looking forward to today's discussion.
And I am Tim Kratz. I'm also our Principal Civil Engineer as well as the Vice President of our Civil Zoning Permitting. And I'm located in the crossroads of America in Maryville, Indiana. Look forward to this. Back to you, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Well, we want to talk a little bit about Sevan Multi-Site Solutions today and how we can help you with QSR projects, whether they be brand new construction or whether they're modernizations or rebrands. Our company represents or goes to the market with a full suite of services. So if you look to the right, you'll see, we call it our wheel, and that represents everything that we provide in the space. So we'll begin with blue, real estate and development services. These services are intended for new build construction projects, NTI, new to industry, greenfield projects that either are brand new dirt or would be something that was where there was a tear down and now we're going to rebuild a restaurant in its ruts. Is the bit that sounds like civil engineering, zoning, being sure you're zoned properly, the permitting and entitlements bit of those new restaurant locations. All of that is wrapped up into one group within our company that Tim is in charge of. Capture and BIM services is primarily aimed at getting information about existing locations. So that applies more in the modernization or the remodel world. LiDAR scan, take the millions of LiDAR off of what's called a point cloud, and from that can create a model of the space. At the same time, it generates a photographic 360 virtual tour. So it enables clients to walk through their space. Not only do they have the BIM model or the CAD files, whichever they prefer, but they can walk through the space virtually through the tool. Architecture and engineering is Kevin Burson's area. This is what it sounds like. It's the construction docs, the permitting documents with the architectural plans. Then construction services, the green one on the left, that is our, call it GC at risk arm. So we're also licensed the country and can take the construction contracts to build or modernize restaurants. And then in the center is program we started the company, we were a program management company. And that's at the heart of everything we do, is really that bit to make things happen for the clients. You'll see data analytics, which really enables all of these to come together in an integrated way and deliver a project on time, etc. You'll see to the left our typical revenue. All of you will know who they are. These represent probably 40 to 50% of our business by revenue, that restaurant sector. Next, a little bit about Sevan. We've been in business since 2011, so almost 13 years. Over that time, we've grown from 7 employees to 530. Today, we have offices in the US and UK. Over this period of time, we've touched about 21,000 restaurant projects, 28,000 retail, 35,000 healthcare. And in our reality capture BIM services line of business, this 1.5 billion, that is square feet of space that we've gone in and assessed with either a LiDAR scan or similar exercise to generate information that the clients can then use to make decisions about scope, cost, etc. Our objectives today are to talk about those 4 things listed to the right: effective client collaboration and needs assessments, understand the current trends in restaurant architecture. We all know over the last 10 years, but certainly since the pandemic, there have been new things occurring in the market aimed at drive-through, delivery, digital ordering with screens and kiosks. Cost-effective design, which also since the pandemic has become very important, as we've all seen construction costs increase. The last estimate I saw was about 30%. And then lastly, navigating regulatory and permitting compliance challenges, which is also an effect of the pandemic, because over time we've seen many municipalities struggle with staffing and intake, where things are not as smooth as they were. And we've seen permitting over the course of the last 3-4 years. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Burson to talk through these objectives.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so really these are some just general strategies. These will vary greatly depending on the brand that we'd be working with, whether it's a ground up building, whether it's a tenant improvement in an existing space, whether it's a startup brand or a well-established brand. There's a lot of variations in there. So really, first, wanted to touch on effective client collaboration, needs assessment. A couple of things here. We've got process, we've got prototyping, implementation. Starting with process, really it's about partnering with a brand and a client to really understand the brand. Really trying to gather as much information, and not only from a building architectural perspective, but also from an operations perspective, so that we can address needs that are not necessarily documented. So understanding how a brand works is really key for a project success. The other thing you really want to look out for is early on identifying key stakeholders. It's really about an efficient process and really making the process of the construction documentation, permitting, everything move very quickly and smoothly. So having names and stakeholders and responsibilities identified very early just helps to streamline that process. Really gathering information, brand books, specifications. Are there any national accounts that we need to be aware of? We can take all of that information and put that into the construction documents so that there's no confusion during construction, and everything is really holding to the brand standards. Jumping over to process, integration, creation. Again, some startup companies may not have a process, and we can certainly help establish that. Some brands have been around for a long time and have a process already established, and we're just we just plug into the existing process that they have. So really, when it comes to process, identifying milestones, identifying stakeholders, again, what are the process for brand approval? Tim will talk a little bit later on permitting and that kind of thing, but this is kind of on the upfront when we're doing schematic drawings, design development. Who the brand is approving that? Is an established process? Is it a process we need to develop ourselves? So just identifying that upfront is huge. Jumping into prototyping, this is a subject kind of close to my heart. I think it's very important to have successful projects and programs, really. If you're having repeated projects throughout the country, you really want to start with a really solid baseline and really integrate everything into your brand, into the construction documents. It's really a technical application of what's in the brand book or the information that is received from the brand. So anything from equipment to materials to specifications, lighting fixtures, all of that, we want to make sure that we are capturing and maintaining the brand identity as we're putting together the construction documents. That said, flexibility is pretty important as well. As you know, you do a prototype, it really establishes a baseline, gets all the information into the documents. From there, how do you implement it into different regions in the United States, different states, cities? They all have independent requirements. So having that flexibility within the prototype is key as well. It could be product availability, regional challenges. So just be prepared to modify that as needed, depending on where the project is. And lastly, on this side is really site implementation. Once you gather all that information for the prototype, you're going to start a site adapt with a real site. So there's a lot of work that goes into that as well. And again, Tim will touch on a lot of that stuff a little bit later in the presentation. But again, it's, existing conditions. Is it a ground up building? Do we need soils report? It's really gathering, again, information that is site specific versus brand specific. There's for tenant improvements, for existing conditions, existing buildings, not a ground up building, but it's important to identify the existing conditions within a space. What are the utilities? What's the condition? Jim kind of touched on that a little bit in the beginning. Moving on to some of the trends that we're seeing with some of the clients, starting with ordering channels. A lot of what we're seeing is, in general, the need to increase speed and accuracy, increasing guest satisfaction. Seems obvious, but a lot of changes have been happening since the pandemic, as Jim mentioned. So it's really, really important. We're seeing a lot of trends pointing towards multi-channels for ordering, and important to create a unique experience for each of those channels for the customers. So starting with dine-in, we saw some brands really focus on drive-throughs and touchless interaction. Some actually went to drive-through only spaces. I think there's kind of a bounce back now that there is really a customer demand for dine-in, but it's really kind of a smaller demand than what it was prior. So smaller dining spaces are a big trend that we're seeing. A lot of kiosk and digital ordering, whether it's through an app or in-store kiosks, that's a huge trend we're seeing. Again, the smaller dining areas, more intimate areas, lower volume in music, temperature, that kind of thing. It's really, really important to ensure that customers having a good experience. We're also seeing a lot of outdoor dining. So there are some things that to be cautious about, really, for outdoor dining. And again, city-related things, conditional use permits, that kind of thing. Tim, I'm sure we'll touch on that. Moving on to drive-through, we're seeing a lot of double drive-through lanes just to increase the speed. Some brands are dedicating one of those lines to third-party delivery or digital order pickup, just to keep, again, keeping the channels separate and isolated to their unique experience and not slowing down the traditional drive-through customer. Moving on to takeout, really, again, it's really the dedicated experience for that individual. If you order through your app, it's a digital order. You want to come into the store, find your food quickly. Legibility is huge, and just have a unique, well thought out experience for that particular customer. Some of the trends we're seeing in interiors, really about the shrinking dining area and enhanced guest experiences, really pushing materials, those types of things. We're also seeing kitchen specialization. So for digital orders, we're seeing dedicated areas within the kitchen, increasing efficiency again, really not impacting the existing kitchen operations as much as possible and still expanding. Moving on to the exterior, a lot of signage we're seeing is kind of a reduction in real estate, really. A lot of brands are just going to logo only. If they have brand recognition already, removing the words from that and just relying on the logos. We're seeing a little bit of EV charging demand on the exterior. But that's kind of the main points that we're seeing there. Moving on to cost-effective design. Again, going back to the reduced dining area, really that results in a reduced footprint for the building, which opens up a lot of doors for many things. It allows for space on the site for an additional lane, really focused on kind of the drive-through and the really quick service speed and efficiency. Having a smaller footprint really allows an increased availability or options, I would say, of parcels when you're looking for real estate for a ground up building. It's not as much real estate, obviously. We've already touched on multiple kitchens within the space. Really cost-driven ideas. We've seen some brands looking at EV stations and then potentially leasing those out. So there are some creative solutions to some of these to kind of increase the revenue and bottom line as well. With that, I will kick it over to Tim to touch on permitting, et cetera. So over to you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And I'm going to advance the slide. And before I get rolling too much on this, I just wanted to emphasize 2 points that Kevin made too, because I think the customer experience is such a huge component of this, and understanding your market, where you are relative to what your options are with a prototype. So where does an EV make sense? If you've got a restaurant site that's right off of a highway, maybe dine-in kitchen is more impactful because you have people that are stopping, taking longer breaks. An EV hub is more impactful. If you're by a high school, maybe the drive-through is more impactful. And really taking that all into account and understanding what your options are, taking your prototype and allowing it to evolve with the need is also what we're seeing a lot of customers do. My family and I recently visited one of our QSR customers' newly opened restaurant sites, and the customer experience was so great that our kids still look at it and refer to it kind of in folklore. It's like, when are we going to go back? When are we going back? And it's like, to some people it's just a QSR, but that customer experience they had puts it kind of on their map, on their radar. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of customers, so our customers and clients look to that a lot more. And And that goes with some of your other opportunities for energy efficiency and even different material types and even your decor, making the decor match what's in the area. And that's really a significant item for how we look at our design and how the architects try to approach these on a site-by-site basis. Now going into the permitting side of this, I asked them to bold challenges, but that title is all bold, so it all just goes there. But I kind of want to highlight on the challenges first, because I think for most people probably on this call, that's how you view permitting and entitlements. It's a challenge to get to where you want to be, and that's to be building your site and ultimately serving. And our approach with this is really to be in front of it and be collaborative. And I just want to talk through a couple of the items that come up the most frequent. So availability of land. We used to talk about having the easy sites are all gone now, and all you're left with is hard sites in all these municipalities. And that's true in some cases, not true in other cases, but it really is a thing to consider as you're selecting sites and understanding what you can and can't do up front, understanding what a conditional permit is, what's your risk to this site before you get too far down the road. And a lot of times, even before you go through the architecture, you might have the perfect site with the perfect customer experience, but you're in the wrong zone, and it can't happen. And we say these things, and sometimes they sound obvious, but every month you hear a horror story of something happened somewhere. And really our approach with getting in front of this, that's what we're trying to avoid, and why we try to look at these type of items up front in the process. Traffic analysis is another big item that comes up now. More and more DOTs are looking to push traffic off the road. So you see frontage road, you see restricted access. We're far away from the days of having the fuel center on the corner of the intersection. It's got 12 approaches, and you can come in and out of it any which way. Everything's very restricted. It's all based off of safety numbers and statistics that look at how people travel on these roads. So it's all great for human life and safety, but it can be a large challenge for you in your QSR space. So it's something that you really want to put on the forefront, and don't leave it to an engineering decision later down the line. Utilities, another challenge that often becomes a headache, but it's really just a challenge because we're dealing with utility company that their objective is to serve tens of thousands of people. So a lot of times when you go in with your application for an 1,000 amp service on the corner of X and Y Street, it doesn't become a priority for them. So getting to the point where you have more complete submittals and do that due diligence and get with the planners up front, that's really a priority you want to take. And that's a hang up that sometimes is unavoidable. We've had situations in Michigan where there was a hurricane in Florida. And so the entire fleet of utility trucks has to go in an emergency response to Florida. So you have an entire area of Michigan where everything's slowed down because of a natural disaster. And that's the stuff that you can't really plan for, you can't really work around, but you have to consider some of these things up front and try to predict them as best you can, and at least take them into account in your scheduling. COVID obviously threw a huge monkey wrench into a lot of things in this industry. It caused a large slowdown. And then because of a large slowdown, now there's a large ramp up. And we're kind of in the midst of this ramp up in development. And the utilities are backlogged in materials. That actually comes in a lot with what Kevin was speaking about in material selection. And that's another thing that, to tie back into what Kevin's saying, material selection, you have to be willing to be versatile and look at other options. And the prototype is great because it's going to get you a baseline of where to start, and it gets you a really good place where this can work. But then you can look in your market. Can you get a better rate on tile, or can you get something that's more available? RTU, looking at different manufacturers, because these guys are a 12-week lead time versus a 24-week for the prototype thing. So really just keeping your options open and understanding the prototypes are best used when they're evolving on the site adapt phase. Initiatives and the city pushes with their master planning and also with their EV infrastructure is it's probably one of the most prevalent things that's coming up now that really doesn't have as much basis in the past, because you're taking the old way was you always wanted more parking. Well, the transition now to a more drive-through based business, a more pickup oriented business, more efficient kitchens in the design, it changes the parking calculations. And now we're saying, well, parking calculations can also be used for an EV space, because that EV infrastructure, as part of the U.S. trying to grow the EV industry, they have to develop the infrastructure to balance it and support it. So places where people are going to be for 20, 30 minutes are great locations for EV. So what we're seeing is a lot of cities are saying, even if they don't have code in place to force you into an EV situation, they're saying, hey, this would be a great idea if you were to put a couple things, because that would help us meet our city goal of every new development having EV locations. So it's something just to keep in mind. And even if it's not something that you're looking for in your immediate build and your current forecasting, it's something to keep in mind to have the infrastructure. Putting in PVC pipe running from a place where a transformer might be someday to a couple parking spaces could save you tens of thousands of dollars rehabbing it later if you did come across a great opportunity or someone wanted to lease a space for EV. It's something that we're seeing should be introduced or at least considered in most designs. Green buildings and recycled materials is another thing. LEED was huge years and years ago, and it's still prevalent, and it's just a little bit more commonplace in how people look at things. It's both sustainable in materials and also financially sustainable to use some of these things and to look at that. So I think where cities are pushing it, a lot of times is in the exterior materials, so it might impact your elevations. But the nice thing about most of those recycled materials and green building processes is they're meant to help in the grand scheme of things, right? So sustainability works on both sides. It's not just I gotta go use recycled tires to build my parking lot. It's all about being practical and being responsible with the materials you choose. And a lot of times being practical and responsible, well, and almost every time also means being financially practical and responsible. Special architecture, it's an interesting one as well. The developer model oftentimes is looking to have that joint look between all of the units on their site. So when you're going through the municipal process in the QSR, we see this all the time where they want the whole development to have a similar look, have similar architectural elements, and it's great because it matches city planning. But sometimes it does put a bind on you with your prototype, because they may require more expensive materials than you're used to using, and it might just be that that it doesn't match perfectly the look that you prefer. Then let's say you had you're a franchisee with multiple sites, and you might have one site that doesn't look like the rest because of some of these requirements. But really, as we look at it, is to try to identify that soon so that you can put that in your decision-making process on the site in that location. Outdoor signage is another topic. Kevin brought it up briefly, but just to reiterate what he was saying, there's a lot of things to consider both in site and also your operations with the number of seats you have and where it's oriented on the site. QSRs, by their very nature, are meant to be getting people in and out of the site. And then you have this drive-through. So making it a safe location, somewhere where people can be, but they're not wrapped on three sides by a drive-through, having space where they can be comfortable. So you see some people that are doing it as, some companies are doing it as a standard these days. And in other places, we're actually seeing it as a jurisdictional requirement because they're trying to get the same amount of space, the same amount of seating space, but have smaller buildings, and cities are pushing for more of that walkable, friendly footprint. And outdoor dining does lead itself to that. And the last point I'd like to make here is really collaborations. You've heard me say it a couple times, and we really like to hammer that home as one of the best practices that we use and we see in the industry. The permitting challenge, regulatory challenges, oftentimes become contentious, where we look at it as the permits are a step that stops us from doing what we want to do, and that's build and serve. And what we try to take it as a whole different approach is say, we're working together because ultimately you have the same goal. It's to protect the human life and safety of all those using it. And you don't have a QSR without customers, right? So in an idealistic world, you're all working together, but we do have to understand, and from what we're seeing a lot is that the municipalities, their world has changed a little bit too. And this is my theory time, but their world has changed since COVID, and that you had a lot of the more seasoned, experienced employees may not have came back after COVID, or they may have gone remote and taken other opportunities with consulting with the increase in construction that came out of COVID. So we're finding that some of the municipalities are either A, understaffed, or they're B, staffed with slightly less experienced people. Both of those can potentially lead to a slowdown in your ability to get permit. So the more you can focus on having people dedicated to the permit process, dedicated to working with the municipality and holding the architects and your permitting managers and your civil engineers, holding them to that standard of working with these cities and getting in front of items is going to benefit your overall timeline. And understanding their point, really a city's most interested in, if they can do it safely, they want to get you out of there, in and out of there fast as possible too, because most permit fees are not based on the amount of hours the permit desk spends with you arguing about whether they have a permit ready or not. You know, they're paid on a set fee, so they want to keep things processing. So understanding that and just taking the side of collaboration with the municipalities is really something that we've had success with, and we feel is something that can help your permit challenge just become a little bit more predictable and a little less painful as time goes on. Jim, I think I'll kick it to you now.
Thank you, Tim. And all the stuff Tim just talked about, permitting and entitlements and all that, and getting in there with the cities. One example we provide is Popeyes Louisiana Kitchen. About a year and a half ago, they asked us to get involved with some of their corporate remodels that should be spreading to the franchise community over time. And they had done a few themselves, and then they asked us to step in. Sevan, please take this from beginning to end. So we want your survey, we want your CDs, we want your permitting, construction management, all of that. And Peter came back to us at the end of that and said, you know, you cut our time in half. And I would love to say it's because we're geniuses. I think the reality is, as Tim mentioned, we're focused on something that maybe in the larger world of a development program for a restaurant, not everybody can focus on that part of the project, but we put people on it strictly focused on getting the permitting and entitlements out of the way so that the construction can start. And that was a highly successful small program we did for Popeyes. Next is a much larger one. We've done thousands of restaurant projects, and part of the Sevan uniqueness is that we have a full range of services, from design all the way through materials procurement onto construction. And that view and that management of the construction really informs how we go about the design process and how we might go about the permitting process. But in this case, this was a program in Southern California. At the time that we executed this, it was the largest single region program that McDonald's had undertaken to modernize their restaurants. And in this case, because it was modernization, we went in and surveyed every location. Then we produced those surveys over the course of about 4 months. It was 650 sites. Then the team, our Sevan team and the McDonald's team, sat in a conference room in Long Beach and scoped every site remotely, rather than getting in a van and driving around for 2 years and looking at 600 plus restaurants. Then we participated in some of the design. We did not do all of it, couldn't, and then moved into all of the project management for that program. So that was a very successful program for one of the largest, if not the largest, QSR chain in the world. And I want to touch on this briefly. This is for Whataburger, and we're working with several of their franchisees and the corporation to develop new sites. And in these cases, we're taking it from the dirt and doing all of the development work that goes along with that. So it's all the design, the permitting, the SIRs, all the upfront work to get the approvals, and then managing the construction process. One of the things that came out of this program was we have a process we call mission alignment process, which is sit down with the stakeholders, the owners, perhaps the franchisees, others who care about the opening of that restaurant, and line out what's in the way, how should we work together, who's doing what. And one of what came out of this session was we need help on the long lead time items, the RTUs, the switchgear, things like that we all know are sometimes projected to arrive well after the opening of the restaurant. So we're working with them to get those orders placed sooner, earlier, and then manage the flow of those things from manufacturer to maybe to a logistics warehouse, and then onto the site when it's needed. So Sevan largely handles what we say we do, what no company can do as quickly or efficiently on their own. The idea being we're augmenting your staff. So those areas where you don't have enough people, or maybe you don't have the expertise, many companies don't have in-house design. They may have in-house project management, that's pretty typical, but maybe not enough project managers, or maybe not in the right place. So we handle all of these project types that you see on the right for all of our clients and deliver them across the country. One point of contact, one whole solution. And think of us as an extension of your team. As I said, it's not that we come in there to displace anybody. We're there to augment and get things done when the client companies just don't have the ability to do everything they'd like to get done. All of our people are W-2. We're located in about 40 states. All of the hot development markets, we have local talent that can come in and help you with your next projects. The strength of Sevan. Now we're to Q&A. Greg, I think it's your turn.
All right, thanks very much. Yeah, we're going to go into the Q&A now. We've got quite a few questions. We'll get through as many as we can in the next, let's say, 10 minutes. And I'm going to toss it out to the three of you and let you fight amongst yourselves as to who will take first crack at them. The first question is, are you seeing more municipalities accepting third-party permit reviews?
Yeah, I'll take that. And then I'll see Kevin, actually, if you have an opinion on this too. We're seeing it as some option, but it's really not as commonplace as it might be nice to hear. I've had a couple conversations. Actually, last year, we were speaking with two different municipalities to talk about how they view that, if they view that as a benefit to them, or if it's additional. Some states actually do have state permitting for like prefab buildings and that kind of thing. And it seems like you have municipalities where, at least the ones we've talked to about that, where they're on board with the idea of it, but they're just not ready for it. And what they're doing is, if they go that route, they're not putting the onus directly on you, but they're doing it through a third party that's hired by the municipality. So you're paying a review fee to the municipality, and you are getting a third party review, but it's really just them facilitating that review process out of the municipality. I think maybe where the question is going, and where we've looked at in the past, is, can I come to a municipality with my own third party review that says, here's a certified reviewed set of plans that's more easily approvable, to help speed up that process. So I think it's an idea that's close, but not commonplace yet. In like, you'll see it in New York City and Chicago and some of these big cities. There's versions of it self-certifying as well, but it's not as commonplace what we're seeing.
All right, the next question. All right, I work for a commercial water treatment company. Who in the construction and design team would a company like ours typically interact with, and at what stage of design and construction would this vital component of quick service restaurants be addressed?
That's a good one. I don't think I've fielded that before. Tim, are you the best guy to take it?
I'm going to reread that because we have the questions here. work for a commercial water treatment company, who in the construction design team would a company like ours typically interact with, and at what stage of design construction would this vital component of QSRs be addressed? It looks to me like if this is a manufacturer of water treatment units, you'd really want to be in an early engagement stage, because as part of their the development process, we want to vet out a lot of those needs as early as possible, because there are costs that come into play with your overall ROI on a project. So I would think that that would be early in the due diligence process, that you'd want to be involved and at least be reaching out, especially when it's municipality driven. And as a distributor, if that's the case here, that these units are going to be used in certain places, and certain cities have approved units already. So you kind of might know before they do that they're going to need it. So that would be the right time to get in really during due diligence.
All right, next question. How do you avoid unnecessary costs?
I would say that is a loaded question with a lot of components to it. I think from our side, I'd approach that from two wings. One, the design, which Kevin, I'll let you take a crack at that after I talk here. The design is a significant component of that, and picking the right materials for the right place. The second with the construction cost is having your drawings and your permits and the next steps, the GC interaction, having that all highly collaborated. We've talked about it in a term called continuity of care, and having someone continue that investment in the project from the design to the bidding to the GC, moving into the field, and making sure everyone knows their responsibilities exactly right. So the bid you're getting is appropriate to the work you need to do per your approved conditions, per your permit. And also looking for ways where you can identify time savings. So, it's probably very obvious to the QSR folks on the line here, but every day you're not serving customers is a day that you can't be making revenue. So try to cut it back any times you can where it makes sense without sacrificing your quality, which could end up costing you later in the future. Kevin, do you want to talk to the design side of that too?
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, it's kind of what I touched on earlier with process. Just to reiterate what you're saying, Tim, is the collaboration early in the project, really identifying the stakeholders. Time and speed to market is really kind of the biggest available cost savings that we're seeing. We'll get into the practicalities and materials. A lot of the times, municipalities will have architectural design standards, which is really forcing certain materials on your building. A lot of the times we like to address initial contact when it comes to design with the municipality is to just introduce what we already have as a prototype and our brand standards, and let them comment on it, on what they will accept and not accept. A lot of the times they're a little bit more flexible, and it's not necessarily by the law when it comes to what's written black and white in the architectural standards. So that's kind of the first approach, and then it's really just negotiating on how to keep the cost down by not having to or challenging some of the materials they're really trying to push on you. Sometimes successful, sometimes not, but yeah, that's mostly how we're dealing with the cost.
All right, we have time for a couple more here, I think. So is a prototype really necessary? And if so, what should be standardized?
Yeah, I can take that. I mean, I feel it's absolutely necessary, because really all the upfront work and all the work that you do to design and gather equipment, furniture, fixtures, all of the upfront design, it's really translated into a prototype set of construction documents. So it really, we kind of touched on it earlier, it serves as a baseline, right? So you know ahead of time that everything is captured in a prototype that you would like to see for the brand. The only time that deviates is, again, architectural design standards on materials, and then also keeping a flexibility to really, if you find a new product that's more cost effective, more available, we can implement that into the prototype so you have consistent application across all projects moving forward. So it's a great clearinghouse for all branding information and really formally and technically document that so that it really maintains brand consistency from store to store.
All right, let's close the program with this one final question, which is how early in the process should we start working on permitting?
Yeah, that's another good question from a timing perspective. In terms of the overall process, I think your permitting needs to be considered, right? As you kind of need to develop a loose plan. I kind of think of it as an increased probability as you go throughout the life of a project. So you do your due diligence and you come up with an initial permit plan and you say, here's my general schedule and here's my general steps. Through some investigation and working with that collaboration with the municipality so you can get in front of it. And then as you go through entitlements, your conditional use, your site plan approvals, your variances, as you go through those processes, you're going to have conditions change. You're going to have DOTs involved. You're going to have an access. Things are going to occur during that entitlement process that are going to alter maybe the steps you need to take for a permit. So once that process is over, as we kick off design, we like to kind of re-engage in that thought process and reassess. So maybe you're 70% accurate at the beginning. After entitlements, you look at it again, develop your permit strategy a little bit more formally now, because now it's going to be tied directly to your construction documents and in your design process. And so if that process takes a month to 2 months to get those drawings done, that kind of gives you a chance to refine your permit timeline and get it as close and tight as you can, collaborating with the city and what their timelines are at that time. And then start your application process before construction documents are ready. A lot of municipalities have a lot of different requirements. You could go to one place and it's an online submittal and it's quick. It takes 5 minutes, you fill it out and you're done. You could go across the streets in a jurisdiction and you need to get signatures from landowners and wet signatures and have notary stamps and have architect signatures and pay fees and different things. And really those requirements, you get, the more you can vet them out up front, the better it's going to process that. But it'll help you eliminate the time it kind of spends with the ball in your court, and you can push the ball into their court where their process and potentially delays are really unavoidable. But what you can't avoid are the delays that are internal to you and your speed to get things out the door and then to return comments after the city provides some review and feedback.
Okay, that's going to conclude our program. If we did not get to your question, we will do our best to follow up with you offline. But many thanks to Sevan Multi-Site Solutions for making today's program possible, to our audience for attending, and of course to our guests for sharing their considerable expertise. As we mentioned earlier, a recording of the program will be linked on QSRmagazine.com, where you can use today's login link to view it at any time. Thanks again and have a great day.